I was trying to watch that zoning meeting the other day. My gosh, it's long.
And good afternoon, everybody. This is Tony Fapiano coming to you from the studio at Guilford Community Television. And I have a really special guest on this program today. I've invited our Chief of Police, Tom Terribile, to be my guest. And the reason that I've asked him to join me in this conversation today is because you may have read or you may have heard that after 40 years of public service to the town of Guilford, he's finally decided that it's time for him to retire. And I just thought that it was only fitting that after all those years and all the effort that he's put in for the benefit of the town of Guilford and the citizens of the town of Guilford, that we take a few minutes to maybe kind of review what's happened to him over the years and how he started. And I thought, Tom, with your permission, we'd sort of start at the very, very beginning, how you got involved in police work, and then sort of follow your career all the way through, and at the same time talk about things that are happening in town with respect to the police department, how things have changed and gotten bigger and better and so forth.
Okay, sounds good.
So with that, let me start at the very beginning.
Okay.
You started, I think, in 1975?
I got hired in March of '75. Previous to that, I had graduated high school in '71, and I was just hanging around working in factories and stuff. So I went in the Air Force, which back then it was weird to actually enlist in the service. Everybody was getting drafted. I went in January '72 as a
sort of at the end of the Vietnam period.
It was right at the end of Vietnam. There was still a couple of years left of it, and I went in as a law enforcement officer in the Air Force, and I served there active until '72 to '74. I then got out and went into reserves and doubled my time. So I was actually discharged in '78. So I was '72 to '78.
So you had that experience in police work.
Correct.
In the military.
Yes.
So what made you decide to get involved with the general public now, get involved with the Guilford Police Department?
Well, I really liked it when I was in the service because in the Air Force we were just like a normal town officer. You had responsibilities of traffic and investigations and domestic violences, all the same things that you're doing on the local level, you were actually doing on the base. The only difference was you didn't have a court like you have here. It was all done by the base commander. So, but everything else is basically the same.
Okay, and I got to think that was a huge qualification for the town of Guilford to consider you to become a police officer, that type of experience.
I would think so. I mean, certainly we had at that point 3 or 4 years of training as a Air Force officer, so it wasn't that hard for me to make the transition.
What was the process like when you interviewed for the job? First of all, there had to be an opening on the police force.
Right, there was 3 openings. At that point, I was an auxiliary officer. When I got out of the service, they weren't hiring at that time, so they had the auxiliaries at that point. So I was an auxiliary officer, and I would come in and ride on the weekends, and it was all volunteer. And through that, I heard there was an opening, so I signed up for the opening. And it was much like it is today, really. I mean, we had to go through a testing process, then we had to do psychologicals and physicals. The only thing that's different today, we do the polygraph, which we didn't do back there in 1975.
Now, okay, let's compare it to what you do today. You say that's very similar as far as what you look for in an officer. What would the perfect officer be, the perfect candidate for an opening on your police force right now? What are you looking for?
We're really looking for somebody that really can communicate well. That's not, can get out in the public and communicate with them in different areas of the public, because certainly we serve
I've had the
different
pleasure
factions.
of that, you know, by the time showing them my license and stuff.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's all how they deal with
Yeah.
people in that, you know, that short time you have with them. You know, when you're trying to look at the applications and see what they've done as far as their life so far, where they've lived, and those sort of work histories and that sort of stuff you're looking for, and you know what experience have they had with communications, with talking and working with people is important, because that's what we do. I mean, we're communicators. Basic, you know, domestic, trying to get the facts out, or just normal conversation with people.
What about education? What about male, female? I mean, do you look for a certain blend of, you know, a certain number of female officers on the force? You know, is there any particular formula that you try to have as a goal, or do things just happen?
Well, number one, the police commissioners are the ones that hire, and we basically hire the most qualified person. Within that, we do have in the back of our head, there's goals that we try to attain, because we are accredited by CALEA. We can get into that later. But that we do have to kind of have the same kind of makeup of the department as we have with the community. So, you know, when you take a look at, you try to do a certain portion of males, certain portion of females, Black, Hispanic, so you get a flavor for the town. So you try to do that makeup. So that's kind of in your back of your mind, but really the biggest thing is getting the right person to fit in for the department in the town.
Yeah, I can see that. Now, I would think today the police officer and the police department in general is probably much more technologically advanced than it was in 1975. So are you looking for an officer that also has technical experience, technical knowledge with computers and you know, all of the new stuff that you guys have in terms of your investigations and all the work that you do?
They come in with a lot of technical knowledge, more
Young
than I
people
have.
today, yeah.
Young people
Yeah.
today. So
Yeah.
for them, it's an addition getting them in young, because they have all this technology they can bring with them and say, hey, you know, I can know a better way to do this. So
Right.
it's nice having the young people come in. Like I said, because we didn't grow up with computers. For them, it's very easy for them to adapt to the computers.
Now, if there was an opening today on the force, and you were a younger by 40 years, would you be somebody that would be qualified with the experience that you had coming in?
Yes. Yeah. What you first go through a testing process, then you go through an interview process with other departments, police departments. We all bring in people to interview the candidates, and so we do it with South Central Chiefs of Police, and typically there's 400 candidates that take the test. So through that, there's the 14 departments within the New Haven region all pick from that pool. So from that pool, then they'll pick.
So you're not necessarily looking for somebody who's from Guilford or from the area even. It's somebody who's the best candidate within that pool of candidates.
Correct. We would like to hire Guilford people, but we very rarely get Guilford people anymore. It seems like we're getting people from the Wallingford, West Haven, Orange area rather than Guilford.
Okay. What's the size of the police force now?
And
what was it when you came on in '75?
We're 37 sworn now. Then with the civilian staff, I think we're at 46. When I first came on, it was like 21 officers. We had more civilian staff back then because we didn't have the computers, so there was a lot of handwork to be done. So as we grew with the computers, there was less need for clerks to put the data into some kind of a tickler system or file system. Everything was hand done and hand typed.
Yeah, and through it all, you had to advance with the changes that were taking place in police work.
Yes.
Over 40 years, I'm sure what you do and how you do it and the way you do it and who you do it to maybe is a little different than what it used to be at the very beginning.
Right. When I first started, there was no computers. Everything was on a punch card. You punched it onto the machine.
Yeah.
From there, somebody would then transcribe that into a log. And so it was all paper at that point. The arrest records were all cards and papers. 1991, that was one of my first jobs, or 89, I think it was when I made lieutenant. They said, we have this new thing coming to computers, and you're in charge of it. And at that point, I really knew nothing about computers. I mean, computers were still.
Who did in '91?
You had the 1088 computers. You had the old IBM computer systems where 287s and 387s were just coming out, and I think 487s were envisioned. This could be this greatest new thing. I mean, that speed of those computers is not even compatible to what we have today. So through that, but the Guilford's officers all took on to the technology, and we just ran with it. We went with the computerization in '91, like I said. From that, we went into I hate to say we're like one of the first, but we were as far as getting that information out into the car. So as an officer, my vision was always to give the officer as much information he can in the car, which keeps him out into the street where he doesn't have to come into the building, or she to come into the building to gather that information. So we were able to put
So they have access right in the car now. They have like a computer in place in the vehicle?
Their office is their car. Their computer system, they can reach databases from the FBI, motor vehicle.
Really?
Our databases here. They can look up anything they need right there on the street. It's all done by the wire and technology that sometimes I don't understand how it's all done, but somehow it works. And it's nice having them. They can write the reports on the car in the street. So it's typically Guilford. It's North Guilford's way up there. It's a 10-mile ride, so we try to keep them above 80. So with that, it's nice to be able to write the report in the car rather than driving all the way south into the station.
Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about what brought you to the decision now to retire after 1975 and all these years. And you've been chief how many years now?
I was appointed chief in 2002.
2002, so it's 12 years, 13 years, going on 13.
13 years, yeah.
Yeah. What brought you to that decision now?
Well, I was I'm going to be 62 in March, and I finished my 40th year in March. And, it was one day I was out walking with my grandson on the beach. I said, this is, why am I doing this? I want to spend time with the kids. And I said, at first I was going to do September. Then I said, for some reason I just wanted to do the 40 in March. And made the decision and said March.
So March of 2015 is...
I finished my 40th year March 11th. So with the pension, you have to start a new month. So that's why it's April 1st, retirement date.
Are you going to be able to do that?
Yeah, I'm going to miss it. I'm already, to the point where I know I'm going to miss it.
I see I go by the police station in the morning. Your car is there very early.
I'm there at 7 o'clock in the morning usually.
Yeah.
I spend less time there now than I used to because now I have a lot of other people to do that. But I'm there 40, 50 hours a week, and I still love it. What I'm really going to miss is, the camaraderie with the officers and working with all the people you work with on a daily basis within the town. The next time a hurricane comes, I'm always been there 24 hours a day. I'm going to miss that, being at the house.
In the action.
In the action, and that's where it's fun. That's when the police work gets fun.
Over the years, we really haven't had horrendous crime in this town. Mm-hmm. There have been some instances that you might qualify as being awful. There's been a few murders and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. That's got to be an awful thing to deal with on a human level. I mean, when you see somebody who's on the short end of that crime, and you're there, you're present, you're looking at it. I mean, that's got to be a tough thing.
You have to learn psychologically how to put that behind you. When I'm on a crime scene and you're dealing with that, you don't really recognize the person as their name. You just kind of block it out. There was a couple incidences where I've been working on a case all night long, a fatality, for example, and I was working this fatality all day with now Sergeant Lingard, who's just retired, and went until I got home, and my wife was getting ready to go to work. I'm working midnights, and she's getting up ready to go to work, and she mentioned the name of the person she's going to work with that day. I go, oh, no, that person just got killed in a car. I didn't put it together until actually I got home, that who that person was.
Really, huh?
Everybody deals with it differently, how you psychologically put that out. Because like you say, there's some very traumatic scenes that we have to go to and see, and how you deal with that psychologically sometimes can be tough.
What's different as far as the job description or the role of a police officer today versus, in 1975, did you walk a beat?
We had beats when I first started.
You don't do that anymore, do you?
We still, we call them different things.
I know you check doors in the commercial areas.
We call it park talk walks. The officers are encouraged to get out and walk the plazas, walk the schools, to get out and to be seen, and get out and talk to the public. Get out when there's a fair on a green or some kind of event. Get out and walk and talk to people. So we encourage them to do that. So it's not like we have a walking beat. You still have a car. You can get in the car and drive to another area and get out and walk.
plus, over these years now, the population has grown, more than doubled. I think it was around 10,000 maybe in
I think
1975.
it was like 13 when I started, and we're at like 23 right now.
Yeah,
so
so
22,
I mean, almost
23.
doubled. And the diversity of the people. You know, there was a time when Guilford was a lot of local people would live in Guilford.
Yes.
You know, and the kids would grow up and get married and have their families in Guilford. Now you have people coming from all over the world, really, to live in this town.
Right. It's more diverse, but I don't really see the difference change with the people. You know, the 40 years I've been here or growing up through the town, and they're still family people. They just want to have a good quality of life. They want to bring their children up, and it's still the same people, I think. I don't think there's much different.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah. I'm looking at some of them. I have 1,000 notes here, by the way. What's the relationship? You already mentioned the police commission does the hiring or is involved in that process, I guess. What's the relationship between you and your police department and the commission? What do we need a commission for? What do they do?
The commission is, I mean, they're in charge by the charter of the hiring of the police officers and the discipline of the police officers. You know, as the chief, I'm the one that oversees the actual running of the police department. The police commission is the one that gets the money from us, which we need from the Board of Finance. So they serve as the political arm. We try not to be political from me down. If I could do it for you, I should be able to do it for anybody. That's why I always looked at it. I don't really know people by parties. Never associated by Republican or Democrat. If we can serve Tony Fapiano, I don't care what party you're from. The commission gets involved with allocating the funds, any political decisions, like a decision on should a street be no parking or parking on the street. Those become political footballs, and that's where we let the commission handle that with the other powers to resolve that, because those issues get very, very sticky sometimes.
What was the discussion between you and the commission with recent happenings really around the world? What happened in Ferguson, Missouri, for example, or what happened in New York City, or the assassination of 2 officers in New York City? Did the commission all of a sudden get very active and want to talk to you and want to have meetings with you about what was going on and how you might handle it?
We didn't have really meetings specifically on that. I think the commission's well informed of procedures that we have in place already, where we would hope that we have more contact with our citizenry, that they understand us and we understand them with a lot of the community-based programs that we have. We're out there talking to people and they see us in a different light, where I think from what I hear in Ferguson, they don't have that contact with the people. They don't trust the police department. I would hope if we had an issue like that, that I could come before the press or the public and tell them what happened. I think they would believe us because of the contact they've had with us, and they can see the work that we do on a daily basis. Yeah. Well, I think that's missing in Ferguson.
Well, you sort of have to weed through what you hear in the media, but from what I heard about Ferguson, or at least the information that was generally put out there, was that that's a community that's predominantly African American and a police force that's predominantly white. So it just seemed like you know, the obvious thing is to say that there was racial motivation for what happened over there. And I know you gave a talk to the Rotary Club about that. Mm-hmm. I mean, how could a police force get so out of whack in terms of not really reflecting the community?
Well, sometimes it's hard to recruit people to get them into the police department, so you can't have a diverse police department. It's very hard recruiting-wise to get them. We've been looking for an Asian type to put with the police department because of their culture. A lot of them don't want to do police work. So we were really looking for Asian to do that. So it's very hard.
Because we now have an Asian population in the town.
Right. I think our Asian population is like 5%. So we were trying to reflect that and try to get an Asian person, but their culture, their parents don't really want them in law enforcement. But it's hard trying to get that makeup, because you have to be able to pass, you know, the background investigation and that sort of thing, and the psychologicals, and it's tough finding qualified young kids now.
What was the fallout or the impact or the on your own officers when that was going on in the world, and the negativity that there was a negative cloud sort of put over broad brush, all police officers fit this mold, and you know that's not true, and I know that's not true, and that's very prejudicial, yet that's what was coming out, is that, all police have to go into retraining, and all police have to do a better job, and you have to hire better people and all that stuff. What was the morale like in your own force?
From the officers on the street, what they're telling me when they're walking around in the center of town.
These are my
now,
hard questions, by the way.
Right. Walking around the center of town now, the officers are telling me they feel the reluctance of people to trust them from what's going on, from what happened before Ferguson to now. They're sensing, the kind of the standoffish and the kind of the cold shoulder where we didn't have that before. So I don't know if people are painting everybody with a broad brush, is that's what officers do, is go out and
Hopefully
violate
it's not everybody doing that.
And it's, it's not, I mean, there might have been, a few instances here and there, but that's what we kind of pride ourselves on in the Guilford Police Department, to make sure those things don't happen. And it's been my mission since I've been in administration since '91 to make sure that the officers, number one, are trained well so they don't do that. And number two, we have checks and balances in place to make sure that if something like that did happen, that we'd be able to catch it.
But what would you do as the chief, and what would others do if somebody on your force was found to have done something less than what you would expect from them? How do you handle that?
We have a discipline system set in place. Certainly, like any other businesses, people are given the first time a verbal talking to by the supervisor. Then the second time maybe another talking, and there's an evaluation system we have. And then there is also the discipline system that we do have to use once in a while. Luckily, we don't have to do it often. But we want to make sure that the officers are doing what we want them to do and what the town's expecting them to do in these situations.
Yeah, I mean, what would we do without you guys? What would it be like?
Sometimes it's lonely at the top. That sometimes the officers don't understand the importance of what we're trying to get through, and sometimes you have to discipline them, and that's always hard on them around when you have to discipline.
Yeah, go way back in history. The cop on the beat was like everybody's pal, everybody's
Right.
friend. Everybody was, Sergeant O'Malley was the great guy.
Right.
So you say that you thought that perhaps some officers thought the public wasn't looking at them in that light.
Right. And since what happened in New York with the assassination of the two officers in New York, now when you're out there as an officer, sometimes people go, well, why aren't they as friendly? Well, sometimes they're not in that realm to be friendly. We kind of trained officers, the green zone is what most people are in. They're just driving around, la, 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 and they're not really paying attention. What an officer's not, they're in a yellow zone, which is a more alert zone, where they're driving down the road, they're looking for somebody breaking into the house, or, a car doing something suspicious, or a motor vehicle violation, or all that. So they're always looking around, and they're not into the conversation piece. And then when you get into a real hazardous area, they're into a red zone where they're just concentrating on the issue before them. So they're not into that talking mode. I mean, sometimes an officer's driving down the street and he didn't wave to me. He's probably looking for a suspect or something like that. So there's a lot of things that are going through the officer's mind at that point where he's not in the communication mode, because we can't be. Especially what I see is happening with the assassination of the two officers. The officers now are a little edgy, and they're a little more edgy of their surroundings. We started where rather than writing the reports in the car with an illuminated light, we had to bring them back into the building to have them write the reports in the station rather than in the car. Because we're not really too sure if there's not somebody else out there that wants to do what happened in New York City. And it's not only in New York City this stuff is happening. Since those two officers got shot in New York, there's been 4 or 5 officers shot around the country with the same thing. So the officers are more alert now than they were.
I was going to ask you, are they looking over their shoulder a little bit more than perhaps they used to?
Absolutely, and they should be.
And do you want them to do that?
We have to. It's just, because right now anybody wearing a uniform, as you saw what happened in New York, it didn't care what color they were. It had nothing to do with race. It had to do with somebody wanted to kill a cop. And that's all it was about, was somebody wanted to kill a cop.
Yeah. Now you and a few others on your force attended one of the funerals. I think Officer Lou.
Right. Members of the department went to the first officer's funeral, and I just happened to have time available to go to Officer Lou's funeral. And
What was that like?
I went there with Officer Jacobers when it set it up with us with the MTA Police Department, and they arranged a bus for us. We got out of Grand Central, brought us right out to the Bronx for the funeral. It was an unbelievable time.
Unbelievable turnout, huh?
Unbelievable turnout. We had a brand new officer. He was just out of the academy for 2 weeks, and he's being trained by another officer. We call him an FTO. So the FTO said, I'm going to go into the funeral myself that day. Can I take the recruit with me? Will you give him the time off? I ended up giving them both the time off because I thought it was very important for the new officer to see the feeling and the camaraderie of law enforcement. And when you got there, the funeral home was on 10th Avenue and 65th, and we were positioned at 17th Avenue. So there were 7 blocks of officers side by side, 3 and 4 deep. I don't know how many people that is, Tony. They tell me 20, 30,000 people. There must have been, we counted 300 motorcycles from all over the country. New Orleans, they shipped them in and trucked them in.
Really?
There must have been 200 dogs there. It was just, to honor the 2 officers that had fallen. It's law enforcement. I think the fire department does the same thing. It's just to honor the 2 that were lost. And it was an unbelievable experience.
It's kind of the negative side of that. What did you think of comments that were made by the mayor and some of the police officers that responded to that?
Well, I don't agree with the turning of the back on the mayor. I mean, you might have an argument with the mayor and disagree at that point, but at that point you're honoring the 2 officers that died. I mean, take those issues up at another time in negotiations. And
do you think those issues will be taken up?
I would hope so. The mayor, I think, should apologize, in my opinion, to the officers from what he said to them during that time. And he offended the officers, and I think he should make that up to them and dish it down the table.
And it wasn't just the mayor. I mean, we had elected and appointed officials on a national level.
They made assumptions.
Disparaging remarks.
They made assumptions that they shouldn't have made. They should have waited for the investigation to get done, and then make their decisions and then make their comments. But to make those right off the cuff, I think, is unfair to everybody, because officers don't go out on the street thinking, oh, let me violate somebody's civil rights today, or let me just shoot that person because they're black. That doesn't happen. If you look at the totality of the circumstances in the Ferguson, that's not what happened. And I don't think we're going to really realize exactly what happened that day and what that officer went through. And we can say, okay, they should have had more contact with the citizens, but why did that person go to the officer, try to reach in the car, which we know that's what happened because there's evidence to show that? Why did he go in there and try to assault the officer? What was his state of mind that day? And then the officers now, in fear for his life, he's got to do stuff that you probably don't want to do. At one point in my career, I almost had to shoot a person, and I'm glad I didn't. Sometimes I question myself why I didn't. But I'm glad I didn't do it. But it's a hard decision to make when you do it.
What would be the factor that would cause the decision to shoot somebody? Your own personal safety has got to be a big one.
Your own personal safety. At this point, he felt that he was going to get killed by this person. At that point, the officer, we give them tools, as you know we have here. We train our officers in all kinds of use of force. We have the tasers. We've had the taser for 10 years, 12 years or so. We have nightsticks. We do firearms training. We do verbal judo training, which is the communication skills to try to talk your way out of it and to de-escalate the situation. But at some point, some people you can't. And that's why we ended up with going with the tasers. I felt there was one more step one more tool in the officer's toolbox before they resort to deadly force. Because once deadly force is used, that officer's life has changed forever. It comes to speculation you're going through, and it's not a pleasant thing to go through. Even though you were right, you're always going to be wrong. So it's a hard decision to make. And that officer in Ferguson, with all those circumstances he had, he thought that was the only thing that he could do at that point was to use deadly force. Would it be nice to have the cameras? Absolutely, it'd be nice to have the cameras. We've had cameras in the cars since I think there were VHS tapes is where we started with the video cameras in the cars. We since have progressed now to digital. We're looking at the issuance of body cameras on
Yeah, I
the
was just going to ask
officer.
you about that. Yeah.
But there's other issues to think about with that. There's, as we know, the society wants to know everything, and they have a right to, under FOI, to see certain evidence. Well, we're mulling over the legal perspective. If I go to your house under domestic and we're talking issues about you and your bride of things that happened, that those tapes would be FOIable. And is that fair to have that tape now? Somebody, your neighbor, can see your argument with your wife on TV, and is that fair to the people we're serving? And how is that going to react with you wanting to talk to me now because you know that your neighbor can get that tape? So we're still trying to vet
So
out all those
compromises
questions.
somebody's privacy issues.
Right.
It could.
It would be great for the officer because it does help us out quite a bit with the cars. People will come in and make
Confirms that you've done the right thing, made the right decisions.
Correct. We'll make a civilian complaint. What the first thing we do is go to the tape, and most times it's like that's not what happened. Here's what really happened,
Right.
and people change their minds. It has happened where the officer was wrong, and they've been disciplined for that. So it has worked both sides. So the body camera is going to be. We have funding
Is
available.
it coming? Is that something that's going to happen?
We had a citizen step up a little while ago that wanted to make a donation, and they've made a really nice donation of $30,000 over the next 3 years to help fund the body cameras. So far, we got 10 this year. We're going to get another 10. And we'll
Even if
get
you did
10.
it on a trial basis to see how it.
We have a couple. We still got to work out the legal requirements on it. I have the policy written. It probably won't be enacted by the time I retire, but the new chief, I'm sure, will take that policy. It's I use policies throughout the countries and from our organizations that the International Chiefs of Police, their best practice policy. So I've adopted that for Guilford. So now it's just a matter of getting out the legal bugs out of it and see what we're going to do. So maybe we won't turn the camera on inside the house. But then what happens is we have to use deadly force in the house because domestics can turn violent. Are we then going to be
You didn't turn
criticized?
the camera on for
Are
a
we
reason.
hiding something?
Yeah.
So we have to
Yeah.
vet all those things out. And I think the legislature might have to take out, with that new technology, which would be great for people, but to restrict the FOI requirements maybe. And that's something that the Connecticut legislature is going to have to figure out.
Yeah. Imagine in 1975, even imagining what a body camera would be.
We were lucky that we had a portable radio that worked in those days. I remember when I was a young cop on the street, I was active in a motor vehicle and that sort of thing. And, you get called in the chief's office for various things like you're rude to the person. Well, I started carrying one of those pocket recorders and I would record all the stops myself. So if I get called in, it goes, no, here's what I said. And after a while, those got actually outlawed by the administration saying you can't do
without
that.
disclosing that you were taping somebody.
Right. Well, you don't disclose
By the
it
way,
now.
we're taping you right now,
We're
just so
taping-
you know.
I know that. But that, they did make them illegal at one point, or against Department rules and regulations to carry those. And here we are now, we're asking officers to do that. So it's weird how things go.
Yeah, the
circle.
technology, it's a whole different world. I mean,
It's a whole different world technology-wise.
yeah. Did any of that come into your mind when you were deciding whether or not this was the time to retire?
No, it's just, I think it's just the time. I've been there 40 years. I've had a great career. I've done a lot of stuff, and I think it's just time. Just time to go do. Last year, I never got my kayak out. I never went hiking, which I love to hike and kayak. And I finally said, I got to go do something for me, and enjoy life.
So what do you think will be next for you?
Right now, I'm not sure. I mean, I got the Rotary Club, as you know. I do that. I'm still into mentoring. I still have a little guy I do mentoring.
Oh, you're
with.
mentoring, what, high school?
I'm doing Baldwin School. It's
Yeah.
I think my third year with the guy I got now.
That's nice.
I think it's my fourth or fifth. Barbara Solomon, she's horrible. She keeps getting me to volunteer, for kids in need. So I'll still be doing that. I'm looking to do volunteer now, and I love hiking. So as a chief, I could never belong to organizations because it just didn't fit well. So I'm looking to join the Westwoods to help Timberland, see what I can do. I love hiking. So, if I'm in the woods, maybe I can help clear some brush or whatever,
Tom, talk a little bit about some of the PR changes that have happened over the years. I know that your police department reaches out to the community in different ways that maybe you never even thought of 40 years ago. What are some of the things that the police department's doing now? For example, I read about this almost like a GPS type bracelet that.
Right.
What's
Project
that all?
Lifesaver. Project Lifesaver started over an unfortunate thing where we had a child that had wandered away from the house, and he found a neighbor's pool, fell, and drowned. So
I've got an interest in autism.
yes.
So I read that and I paid attention to it.
So then there's a mom of another child that was worried about that, and she came and she said I saw this thing, Project Lifesaver. Can we do something with it? And at that point, it was like a $10,000 or $12,000 expenditure. And as doing budget, you're saying, yeah, 10 or 12. Where am I going to get $10,000 or $12,000 to do this project from? Well, then we found out she was able to raise private money to fund it. So what we were able to do is the person wears an electronic bracelet on, and it sends a radio signal out. So if the person's missing, we have gear in the supervisor's car and the fire department. We worked it together. Where now we have a receiver. The transmitter's on the person. The officer or the fire officer has the receiver, and through that you're able to radio wise figure out where that individual might be. We had infrared cameras. We still do have an infrared camera. Which technology-wise, the town of Guilford's always given us whatever we need. There's never, if I can justify it, the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen have been always great to the Guilford Police Department as far as our equipment. So we had the infrared camera, but that doesn't
process
work
is going
well.
on right now, right, with the Board of Finance?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the infrared camera will work well, but it doesn't work well with foliage. So between the radio and the infrared camera, hopefully we'll be able to find the missing person before something tragically happens.
Now you, as chief, you said 13 years. You've gone through several political administrations. There's been changeovers at the top, at the first selectman's office, several times now. Over that period of time, you've gone from maybe liberal to conservative, back to liberal, back to conservative. Does that impact your budget requirements or the ability to have money generated for the benefit of the community?
We're lucky with the town of Guilford. It's never been political. Like I said, I started making rank back
Now
in
that's a political answer.
It never has been. There's never been a time where I ever had a selectman call up and say, I want you to do this because of I've never been asked to do that. Maybe it's just because they knew I'm not political, and if I could do it for somebody, I would have done it. If it was something unethical or wrong, I would have said no. I would find a nicer way to say no than that. But we've never been asked. I've never been put in that position as far as I've been in administration to do something like that. I forget how many people I was trying to think. I started with Frank Larkin, Sam Bartlett, Eddie Lynch, Carl Balstraci a couple times, Gene Bishop a couple times now with Joe Mazza. It's a nice working relationship.
A couple of handfuls.
And the Board of Finance, the thing I've always prided myself with the Board of Finance is to put the budget out there, make it honest, make it realistic, show you where the numbers are. And we don't, they question it, but they can see where we're spending everything. And I was criticized when I first did it. Oh no, you got to hide stuff, kid. You got to put, I've never done that. Going through college and taking all my courses I've had through college, it's always been be up front and honest about it, and they can see where you're coming from.
What about salaries for your police force? Who is there a police union that negotiates for them with the town, or how does that work?
The police union negotiates with the Board of Police Commissioners and the selectmen for those numbers. I get involved with the.
So when a contract is put in place and it requires an increase of X number of percent next year,
they do that.
That's going to happen.
I do the language sort of stuff, like the working environment, how many holidays, how many vacation days, and I'll figure that sort of stuff on how that works. But when it comes to monetary issues, that's where the police commission in their political role takes over with the Board of Selectmen, and they work that out.
In a way, that's a good thing. You have to deal with the police officers on a daily working basis, so you don't want to get involved with being the guy that approves or disapproves of their salary.
Correct. It's done by the Board of Police Commissioners.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Powers to be.
There's so much that goes on. There's so many questions I can ask you about the experiences that you've had and things that have changed over the years, but it's about 40 minutes already. I don't know if you know that, that we've been talking.
Yeah.
And we talked about PR and we talked about budget. What about your relationship or cooperation with state police and federal officials and so forth? At what point do you reach out to them and say, we need help with such and such?
I have very good relationship with the surrounding departments in the federal and state agencies. Like I said, I went to the FBI Academy for training. That was an honor to go down there for 11 weeks with 250 other officers being trained in a college type atmosphere. So through that, you had the connection with the FBI. We have personal meetings, once a month with the FBI National Academy, and so we get the personal contact with the commanders of the FBI. Also,
Are they available to you if you need to reach out?
Absolutely. The state police.
And are you available to them if they need help?
Yes. The FBI, I'm kind of happy the FBI does trust us. When they have critical arrests to make, they will bring them out to us and we will hold them for whatever time period. And they don't do that in a lot of places. So we work well together. The U.S. Attorneys Marshals, the U.S. Marshals we work very well with. Connecticut State Police are fantastic. Being with a small department, we can't afford a dog. Because not that we couldn't afford it, but there's not enough use for the dog to keep the dog active.
The efficient use of the taxpayer's dollar.
Correct. So we have the Connecticut State Police, and we use, we'll call them when we need a dog for a search or the search a building, or Madison Police Department, they have a dog. So we share people back and forth. A lot of departments don't have a lot of females working, so when they have a female arrest, they'll call us.
You do.
We'll send a female officer over to do the search, the pat down of their female officer. So we try to share back and forth. So if I have something and the other town can use it, we borrow back and forth. We've just regionalized our SWAT team, where I used to try to have 13 members of our department on the SWAT team. Well, now between Brantford and Madison, we've made a Shoreline Regional SWAT. Now we just combine that with North Haven, North Brantford, and East Haven. So now we have a bigger pool to pick from. We can have less officers on the team because that requires a lot of training and then equipment. So I have a brand new nice command post that the town was very nice to purchase for us. So we can kind of consider their regional asset now. If they need it, we will bring it to them and use it. And if I need Brantford's equipment, Brantford brings their equipment to us. So it does save us quite a bit of money. And we get the interaction between the officers. Because like it happened in Newtown. I mean, they had several departments show up on that rescue of the schools. Well, that could happen in Guilford. So we've been training with our officers on days, with the Madison officers and the Brantford officers, what if that happened at a Guilford school or if that happened at a Brantford school. Those officers from the Shoreline are all going to have to respond to all those schools in that surrounding area. So we've been trying to train the officers where the schools are, number one, and then train with the other towns officers, so we're doing the same sort of thing.
I don't know if it happens or it doesn't happen or if it's even a factor, but the state legislature is constantly looking at new legislation. Mm-hmm. Does some of that legislation actually cover police activity? And to what extent do you have a relationship with our state representatives with the creation of some of the legislation or changes that take place in laws?
There is one statute in the books.
And by the way, we lost two
very good
leaders that have been there for a very long time with Woodlitz and Meyer.
Meyer's both gone.
And you're leaving at the same time,
right.
By the way.
Mr. Myers was good because he was a prosecutor in New York, so we kind of understood some of the issues.
Yeah, you talk the same language.
Right. Yeah. There is a law that gives the authority in an emergency that we can do mutual aid, but that's in an emergency situation. The way the laws are written, an officer has arrest powers throughout the state just for a felony. It would be nice that we can get it to be so we can go do misdemeanors in other towns. So say if I want to do a burglary squad with Madison, so like I said, my detectives go over and work with Madison, but we can't make misdemeanor arrests in Madison. So we have to rely on the Madison officer to make that arrest. It complicates issues sometimes where the Connecticut State Police have universal state arrest powers. It would be nice if they would give that also to the smaller the towns.
Okay, do you want to think back now over the years, over the 13 years and maybe even before that, some of the things that you're really happy that you did, some of the things that you were involved in, or some concept or idea that you had that made it to fruition, and Can you think of things? You're a very modest guy, so I know it's going to be a hard question for you to answer.
Probably it's always been a group effort. I'm more into like not just my idea, but a group. But a couple group things that we did, mentoring. I talked about mentoring. I was on the first committee with Barbara Solomon, with a bunch of other people that came up with the mentoring. As you know, there's 150 mentors within the Guilford school system. We've done a lot of work with domestic violence because that's one of our major issues in Guilford. Domestic violence is between
More common than you think, right?
very common, and we have a lot of programs now. Sergeant Renchie's in charge of it. He does a great job with it. We have all kinds of programs set up for the victim and for the children using youth and family services. I tell you, the citizens of Guilford are very lucky. We have a lot of programs between the school system and the town that we can really, really help people out. Youth and family services, we work hand in hand with them. Our officer knows their clients, so if we have issues, we can call the clinicians right out at the scene to help us in a domestic. If a domestic's going on and we arrest a mom or dad for assault, we can bring the clinicians right out there to start treating the kid right then and there. We have another program called LAP, Lethality Assessment Program, that if we believe the officers have a questionnaire and they go through, if it reaches a certain criteria, we can get them housing and get them away from that volatile situation. It all takes time. In a domestic, it used to take you a half hour when I was first a cop. You walk in, okay, you hit him, you got arrested, you drag him out, throw him in the car, you threw him in the cell, and that was it. Well, now it's a lot of counseling, it's a lot of getting the victim help, where you really, the courts are set up for it, and we're set up for it. So that's a good thing I think law enforcement started with, was domestic violence. They changed the laws, where I see a lot of less recidivism on the people. We're giving a lot of help. So those are two, I think, really good programs we've done. You mentioned it before, is the cars, installing the car seats in the cars.
Oh yeah, I could
Big
never
program.
do that. My grandchildren couldn't. I can't put these things in.
Big program, and again, Guilford's lucky. We had these the citizens, the family that raises money for us. Now that the town couldn't afford it, but it's nice to have the citizens help us out. So we were able to put
That was
together.
the Mason family, I think.
The
right?
Mason family has been fantastic
Yeah,
for
they had
us.
a tremendous loss in their family. Which,
Correct, and
yeah.
they've been, I think, the third or fourth year now. We're probably at $50,000-$60,000 the money they've
Really?
raised.
Wow.
So with that, and we've been able to buy car seats. So if a person gets there and a car seat's effective, we can give them a car seat to make sure that that child is safe. Like I said before, a lot of towns don't do that. So we get people from East Haven and New Haven. We don't care. The mission is to make sure kids are safe and they don't get hurt in a car accident. So we do that even though they're not Guilford citizens.
Yeah. Well, again, the community outreach. You also have that Citizens Academy, I think you call it.
Citizen Police Academy should be starting up a little bit. I started that under Ken Cruz way back when. We want, again, to get law enforcement out there and get it to where people understand what we do and why we do it. We started that program many, many years ago, probably 25 years ago now, about how officers do stuff and why we do it. A sort of thing like motor vehicle stop. They don't understand, well, the officer had his hand on the gun. Well, there's a reason for that. And when they get in the car and they ride with the officer, they find out why the officer's doing those
Right.
sort of things. Why is the flashlight in my eyes? Well, once they get out there, they understand why that's happening.
Yeah.
So that was a good thing for law enforcement.
All right, Tom. I think we're at the end of our time. We're close to it. You're going to be leaving in a month or two, and somebody's going to take your place at some point. What's that process like? What is the town looking at in terms of finding a replacement for somebody, so that the quality of the people at the top remains as high as it can possibly be?
The police commission is a hiring authority, so they've done interviews.
They've already done some.
They've done some interviews. They do have they're talking a contract out with an employee about that. They voted on it at their commission meeting last Wednesday. It then has to go before the Board of Selectmen to approve the contract. And I think they have that scheduled for their first meeting in February. Then we can make that name known. But
Okay. Did
it's
you
just
have
a
any
matter of
input
time.
in that process?
Oh, sure. I mean, I offered my opinion to the commission, and they took some of the
Yeah,
things
not
I
to
had.
tip the hand of who the person might be, but did they look within the police force and outside the force? I mean, where do the applicants come from?
They looked inside the force to begin with. Their first thought was, okay, if we have qualified candidates, let's take a look at the qualified candidates. You can do a national search, but the problem with the national search, aren't really sure what you're getting. If you know the person's inside and you like what they do, they know the culture of the place.
And we've done both over the years. I mean, you
have.
came from within, and your predecessor came from New Haven, Ken Cruz, right?
Correct. At that time, when they brought in Chief Cruz, there was a need for it. The department was in need of a change,
Really?
To the better. And I think a lot of things that Chief Cruz had done since he came on, I was able to carry on because I worked under him for 14 years. And through him, we were able to keep that mission going and keep that culture of the place going. Because as you go from one business to the next, our culture is different than Madison's culture and Brantford's culture of how we serve the citizens. A lot of times we get made fun of that we're out a barking dog complaint or those sort of things. But that's how we keep the quality of life good for the citizens of Guilford. It's, in the middle of a midnight at 2 o'clock in the morning, we're the only ones working. So people call us for everything. So we're there no matter what, answer any call that they have. So it's important that the person that's going to be the chief understands that, understands what the community expects and how we can better serve the community.
Yeah. What have I not asked you that you think might be important to discuss in terms of the police department?
I can't. I mean, all I can tell you, I know there's 37 sworn people, including myself, or 36, that enjoy doing what they do. I know they would give up their life for a citizen if they had to, and I just got to make sure the citizens understand that we're not out. We don't do things based on race. With everything that's going on in the country right now, that's the last thing an officer thinks about in my department. About, oh, that's a black person, I'm going to pull them over. Number one, I offer the citizens to try to look at a car at night or even during the day to understand who that person is in the car. We train our officers, we don't even think that way. We think the violation. If you're going through a red light, I don't care if you're pink, purple, or green, you just committed something that can hurt somebody else, and to reduce the traffic accident.
I paid the fine for that, Tom.
You paid the fine. When I first started, Tony, we had fatalities were really, really high. It was before radar guns were used, and we got the fatality rate down really, really low, maybe one every 2 years or so, knock on wood. And before that, we used to have 3, 4 a year based on speeds, and it kept the fire department busy. So through our efforts of traffic enforcement, it's reduced the number of serious accidents and the fatalities. So you got to train the officers to do that. And it's not based on a color or sex. Based on, back in 1991, it was one of my first projects with Chief Cruz. We're always aware of what was going on in other communities. At that point, Hampstead was going on. And there was a town that was a police department that was pulling people over just because of the race. It was known that they had done that. It came out publicly. So the first thing Cruz said to me was, how can we make sure, number one, officers aren't doing it, and how can we show and prove statistically we're not? So I had to devise a way to come up with to make sure that, number one, our supervisors were checking to make sure the officers weren't doing that, and number two, a way to track it. And a lot of our colleagues didn't like us for doing that because they said they couldn't do it. And here we were doing it, a small town, and we've been doing it since 1991. And we track it, we look at those numbers, and we make sure that our officers are not doing it. Because we don't want it. It shouldn't be done.
Yeah, so are you saying that you review every case that comes through to see who's involved and what the motivation was for the officer to issue a citation?
Correct. We track every stop is number one, they have to call in the stop, every stop, and then
not just traffic violations, but also domestic and whatever, theft, whatever.
Every report's written. I review every report. The deputy chief reviews every report. The supervisors all review every report. So it goes all the way up the line. We check, we make sure, and double check that what the officers say they're doing, they're actually doing.
Donald's giving us it's time. Okay, we're just about at an hour now. So, Tom, again, I want to thank you for everything that you did here today. I appreciate you coming down, taking time out of your schedule, and I think you've enlightened me at least with a lot of information. Hopefully, the folks at home watching will feel the same way. But even more importantly, thank you for your 40 years. I mean, that's unbelievable. I mean, 40 years, and the way you've gone through the ranks and the way that you have created the image about yourself and the aura about who Tom Terribile is, I think is really, really great. And I want to thank you for that and all of your years of public service.
I appreciate it. It's been an honor. You know, since starting '72, serving the country back in the Air Force through to today, it's been an honor to do that.
Okay. Well, with that, we're going to wrap this up. Again, thanks so much, Tom. I appreciate it. This will be on GCTV. This will be on at 2 in the morning. If you're not sleeping some night, you'll be able to see that or some other time. So with that, this is Tony Fapiano. I want to thank everybody for watching. And Tom will be at his desk for the next month or two. But beyond that, if you want to get in touch with him and discuss any of these issues further, you'll have a lot of time on your hands, I assume, at that point.
I'm available.
You're available.
Available.
All right. With that, this is Tony Fapiano. Thank you for watching.